So how this will work is Jamie and I will do a double act. And, so just as a starting point, I'd like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the land that we all find ourselves on today and their elders past, present, and future. Today, we're going to talk about really kind of engagement. The main focus today is going to be engagement. We're going to share a case study and a little bit about the journey that we've had at ADHD Australia. So I'm going to dig in, and I'd really encourage you, if you can, to use the chat for questions or comments. Super helpful for us to hear what's on your minds. And, since we're on this journey and this journey isn't finished, any comments, thoughts, feedback that you have will be super useful for our team as well. So please dig in and share if you can. And also, if I could just request that everyone put themselves on mute for a moment, that would be great. And at various points, we may stop and open it up for questions. Okay, so I'm going to share my screen, and hopefully this will work and everyone can see that. All right, is that up there?
Yeah.
Perfect. Okay, so as advertised, today's discussion is going to be about building community and member engagement for not-for-profits and associations. And like I said, we're going to share a case study related to ADHD Australia predominantly. And so we're really excited about sharing our story here, which is, as I said, a work in progress. So just a little bit about me. My name is Matt Tice. I have a number of different roles. So you can see from my background, my day job role is the CEO of a company called Insurgence Group. And we do a lot of consulting work for not-for-profits and associations, helping them with strategy and member and customer experience and engagement and things like that, which I bring up because it's highly relevant to the work that we're doing at ADHD Australia. And my night job, I have a few of them. Really, I'm the chair of ADHD Australia. I'm also a board chair for an engineering company, an AI startup, not-for-profit in the US. For anyone who's interested in rugby, I'm on the board of the National Collegiate Rugby. And I'm an advisory board member of a company called Resilient Ready. You may know Renee Hanvin. She's everywhere all at once and force of nature. So, so I have a few balls in the air, but today predominantly we'll be talking about ADHD Australia. So ADHD, for those of you who are not familiar with it, really affects a pretty significant part of our Australian population. Over 1 million people are affected, 5% of the population, and that ripples out to a much broader group of people, and roughly the same number of people are supporting on the front lines individuals with ADHD. So it's almost one of the biggest health-related conditions that Australians face, although in some ways it can be quite invisible, which has challenges. And certainly ADHD reaches into every part of life, and we'll kind of come into that a little bit later. And people with ADHD really struggle because it's difficult to get access to quality information, to medication, to healthcare, to the health system. And certainly we've seen over the last, I guess, decade or so, a bit of a shift in terms of if we were having this conversation maybe 8 or 9 years ago, we would be talking about stigma. And I think that's not completely shifted, but it's starting to shift. And certainly with the work that our colleagues in the autism space have done over the last 2 decades, have really sort of kind of plowed the ground ahead of us in terms of acceptance of neurodivergence, neurodiversity, and driving neuro-inclusive opportunities for people. So that still means that there are lots of challenges ahead, and our goal at ADHD Australia is to help on the advocacy front for these issues, but also to provide resources, content, and trusted information for individuals that are navigating ADHD as a condition. So when we started this process, not surprisingly, we took kind of a design thinking approach to the big question for us is how do you engage a million people and then another million people who are out there supporting individuals with ADHD. And for those of you who aren't familiar with design thinking, it's a really powerful and useful innovation methodology, which really starts in the jungle, understanding the user and how the user experiences both the value, but also the challenges related to, in this case, ADHD. And what it basically does is creates an opportunity for us to work with the community, learn what the community's needs are, create some concepts, and essentially, over time, iterate to solutions that help us create a high degree of engagement and enthusiasm amongst our community, but eventually land on a set of toolkits and utilities that our community can take advantage of and that we can bring to the world. So, if you're not familiar with design thinking, happy to talk about it offline, but this sort of iterative process has been at the heart of our thinking and our philosophy around how we create this engagement with our constituents. So our key problem statement, we always start design thinking with a problem statement. And as I mentioned, how do we engage a community of 1.2 million people with ADHD, their families and carers, and then the 1.5 million people that support them? These are pretty big numbers, and ultimately, almost everybody with ADHD has a coexisting condition, like could be autism or oppositional defiant disorder or some other challenge. So that's a key issue, and certainly if you think about the vast number of people that support individuals with ADHD, include almost every teacher from primary through to secondary and on to adult learning, almost every employer, almost every healthcare professional, police, judges, etc. So there's a huge ecosystem of individuals that are engaged with individuals with ADHD. And if anyone has any experience with ADHD, you'll know that those individuals are not well equipped to support neurodivergent individuals in many cases. So this is a real challenge for our society and certainly for our community. So, for us, the main question is, how do we actually engage these people at this kind of scale? So where do we even start? So I think this is an obvious question. I really like this little video, sort of this little photo here, which kind of describes our core philosophy, which is always to work back from those that have ADHD and to hear their stories. And over the last decade, and we have Rob Lowe here, who's our chief marketing officer, and wears a lot of different hats in ADHD Australia. And over the last decade, where we start is to listen to the lived experience of our community. What are they challenged with? What are they seeing in the community? What are they struggling with? Who are they talking to? What are the problems they face day to day? How does that differ between young people, old people? How does that differ between people in education settings and justice settings, and so on? So really creating a tapestry of experience, in other words, a very user-led or community-led journey. So for us, taking all those stories and compiling them and trying to figure out a way to create engagement has been at the center of our journey here. Now, a big problem with that we see is that where these individuals and people that support these individuals go for information and resources is often social media, TikTok, Facebook, Reddit, sort of illustrated here. And while those are tremendous channels for people to get information, the problem with these channels is that much of the information is not authoritative, isn't backed up by evidence, is often harmful to the community. But because they're default sort of mechanisms for people to engage with, it's easy for you to go to Reddit and ask a question about ADHD, and thousands of people will pile on. But unfortunately, many of those people are, um, you know, are hacks or don't have any authority. So we really worry deeply about the quality and safety of the information and resources that individuals are consuming in our ecosystem. And I think also our community worries about it too, because that engagement and experience, while sometimes really helpful, like a TikTok video is easy to consume, and certainly there is, there are thousands and thousands of ADHD related TikToks. How do I know which ones are the right ones? How do I know which ones have evidence behind them? How do I know which ones are safe, which ones are harmful? Really, the community can't make those judgments, and I think that's a real problem. So, one of our core tenets in this journey is how do we deal with this challenge of trust, and then how do we create something that gives people a sense of safety in their navigation of the ADHD experience. So, some good news. In 2023, the Senate inquiry process happened with ADHD, and that process delivered a number of recommendations, which really signaled that finally the government is getting behind this. And one of the big recommendations that came out of that inquiry process was the need for more digital resources for individuals with ADHD and more channels for information to help, more trusted channels for individuals to be able to get the quality information and resources that they need. Now, we were already on this journey by the time this happened, but the good news was that now we have some authority behind it, with the government sort of fronting up and really suggesting that this is a key priority. We're still sort of working hard to get the funding to come behind that, but we have seen a real shift both at the national and state level in terms of the desire to support this community, and probably not least because 1.2 million people is a significant group politically. So I think that plays a key role as well. So our original vision was very simple, and this has evolved over the years, but we sort of have really anchored to this vision that every individual with ADHD and often with coexisting conditions, and of course those that support them, should have access to trustworthy and authoritative content and resources, and a safe place to gather and share these resources with their people. And this has sort of been our North Star in terms of how do we provide this opportunity to create this experience and engagement around this vision. And because we listen to these sort of lived experience stories over, I think this is our 11th year, as I mentioned, because we've listened to all these stories, this is just the common denominator, is that we need a safe place to gather and share trusted resources with our tribe, if you will. And that's been our North Star. So to sort of think about that, unpacking the design thinking approach, we took a view that we have to be relevant in the most important journeys that individuals with ADHD experience in their lives. And so what we did was we worked really hard to try to distill what are those key journeys and what do they mean. And we landed on these five, which sort of provide both a fabric for the work that we're doing here in terms of creating the experience, but also how we organize at ADHD Australia. So from our board all the way down through our leadership team and into our army of volunteers, this is how we think about the world, is relevance in each of these five journeys, which are home and community. That's sort of where I live. Education, that's where I learn. Employment is where I work. Healthcare, obviously, is how I navigate the condition itself. And unfortunately, we have a disproportionate number of a percentage of our population involved in the justice system. And having been involved on both sides of the system, I can say that often these individuals are not really well equipped to support individuals with ADHD or neurodivergent individuals in general. So these journeys are really central to how we think about the world. And where we want to be is fundamentally supporting individuals navigating these journeys. But on the flip side of that coin, we also want to be able to support teachers with education and resources to be able to support those individuals too, and employers and judges and police and general practitioners and so forth in a way that brings together the best of what's available to help people make informed decisions and to navigate the conditions successfully. So another mechanism that we use to start thinking about this challenge, and I'm a big fan in innovation work of always thinking of an analog. And Jamie and I were talking about this before we got started here today. And an analog is a way to sort of anchor your thinking and to think a little bit obliquely about the problem. And we came up with this notion of Project Alexandria. And the analog that we created was this notion of the ancient library of Alexandria was the place for the ancient world to come together and engage together and learn and create and evolve the best of the world's science at that time. And it was sort of a global hub in the ancient world. And I really liked that sort of concept of how do we create something that could be similar to that for ADHDers in the community, where they could go to that library, they could interact with their peers, they could get trusted information, the best of what's available today, and then over time add to that corpus of information as well. So Project Alexandria became our sort of rallying cry for how to bring everyone together, and importantly, created a language for us to share that was comfortable and familiar. And over time, as our team kind of came on board with this concept, this was a way for us to speak in a way that everyone could understand what we're trying to achieve. So we've since sort of that when this was still in development and it was the project, we called it Project Alexandria. It's since evolved from that, but that was a really helpful way to anchor our thinking. So the requirements of the work in building the solutions that we created really started with this idea that our community needs an experience. So it's really not so much about the content. It's about creating a place where that experience could be comfortable and familiar to individuals with ADHD. It's the ADHD mind is different and has different requirements in terms of how we create. You can't just spray content at these people. You really have to create something that allows them to engage in a way and meet them where they are from a point of view of it has to be safe and comfortable. So these were some of the requirements that we developed, and there's obviously a longer list, but experience first, content second, always focus on safety and trust, neuroaccessibility, really important, ability to something familiar to people, something that they're able to interact with. We don't have to create something complex and difficult for them to learn. Something that's scalable. Remember, 1.2 million and another 2 million people odd that we have to kind of engage beyond that. Something that's future-proof and AI compatible, and ideally beautiful, right? So part of design is if you can create something that sort of has a beauty to it and an elegance to it, people will be attracted to that, and that's a big part of the way we think about the world. The other thing is, and I don't know if anyone here has experience with inclusive design, but as you're probably aware, there's always going to be a distribution of people that you're working with. And what we're trying to do is build something that's relevant at the edges of that distribution so that individuals with extreme needs, either really struggling or perhaps in a disadvantaged community or perhaps a super user. We find that if you can design something that's really robust at the edges, that everyone in the middle will will be able to experience and benefit from that, those individuals at the extremes. So again, a key sort of design thinking tenet is to build for the edge cases and then work towards the middle. And we've tried to embody some of that philosophy in our thinking as we've gone through this work. Now, like all these things, don't pay too much attention to the detail, but like all these things, we started with a napkin sketch. What could this thing look like if we sort of put it together, and how would it work, and how would people engage with it? We probably have, I don't know how many versions of this, literally on a napkin, on a piece of paper, on a slide, etc. And we just kept trying to sort of, you know, create an architecture that kind of made sense, that we could anchor some of our work to actually build this engagement platform around, which sort of meets those requirements that we talked about before. And we found that these sketches were really helpful in terms of both onboarding the team, but also helping us test and challenge our thinking. So for those of you who've been through these types of programs, this will be familiar to you. But what we've discovered is that every time we draw a design, we learn something from the community, and that design evolves. And we have to rub the design almost clear and start over. Not quite, but that sort of iterative approach has been central to our thinking as well. So we'd encourage you to have a napkin sketch as well. And one of our biggest challenges along the way, like all things, is change management. Is getting what for us is a reasonably large army of volunteers to understand what we're trying to accomplish here, and then to mobilize to actually achieve it, and trying to communicate what we're trying to get to, what the vision is, requires real discipline on the part of me, the board, the leadership team, to keep telling the story over and over and over again in a way that is simple, communicates really what we're trying to accomplish, but also shows how they can contribute to that as well. So this process has been going on for about 24 months, from our original vision and concept to now realization, and we're in the launch phase now. And I'd say one of our biggest challenges has been, how do we move really quickly, because we all feel the pressure of being able to provide these resources and this capability to the community, but how do we balance that with doing it right? And that's been a challenge. And just, excuse me, for those of you who are out there listening today, uh, our entire workforce is built on volunteers. We have, I don't know, somewhere between 75 and 100 volunteers working on various projects and programs. And this is one of our biggest initiatives for this period of our strategy. So keeping those individuals who are volunteering in small blocks of time engaged is an ongoing challenge. So anyway, now obviously we can't do this ourselves, and so cue up Jamie, who I met a few years ago, and we started talking about this vision. And Jamie he calls himself a learning evangelist, and Jamie really gets the thing that we were talking about earlier in terms of experience first and content and technology second. And virtually everyone else that we talked to wanted to bring us tools and functions, but we didn't want tools and functions. We wanted to create a beautiful, engaging, trustworthy experience for our constituents. And Jamie really understands that. And Jamie's been a great partner in helping us bring this vision to life. So I might introduce you, Jamie, and let you tell a little bit of your story, and encourage anyone, if you have any burning questions, to please ask before we pivot to the case study.
Sure. Yeah, if anyone wants to put questions in the chat while I'm doing an introduction, that's fine. So my background extends across film production for about 15 years on Hollywood movies and doing from the kind of mid 90s, the early stages and then middle stages of 3D animation and visual effects and the whole development of that. Screenwriting and storytelling is a great love of mine, and I've written film scripts. And if you know the work of Joseph Campbell, I'm a huge lover of that work around transformation of the hero. And then this, I guess the second phase of my life brought me into education. And I taught for over 10 years at Torrens at Billy Blue College of Design, and found myself when I started teaching. They asked me after finding me at a Vivid talk, I gave a talk, and they're like, "Do you want to be a teacher?" And I'm like, "What would you want me to teach?" And they said, "This brand management." I'm like, "That sounds terrifying." And I've never worked in branding. And I got curious and thought, okay, that's terrifying. I should do it. Fell in love with teaching, fell in love with the students, and then very quickly went, why is the learning experience so awful? And if you guys know Blackboard or Moodle, that's what they're using. And it just really piqued my interest. Like, what is this? Like, how ironic. It's a design college and the typography of the learning platform is just awful and it's boring and it's just not engaging students. So that kicked off the third stage of my life, which was creating a platform that kind of was an answer to all that. And so really it came out of wanting to create an engaging experience that creates community. And I thought a lot of the learning platforms, it's such a, you're in a school, but there's no connection with anyone on the platform. So I guess that's the DNA. And in meeting Matt, it was great as we got to know each other and I was listening to the challenges and we realized really what I'd built for learning institutions could be employed in this use case quite easily and would suit it very well because it's as much about building a social community, if not maybe even more about that than just the learning experience. And that learning happens in community, I believe, a lot of learning. Um, so other things in my background, I've been on the advisory board for Rio Tinto sponsored initiative Future Minds, which David Gonski chaired. So it's a great pleasure working with David Gonski in that capacity. So I'm quite fascinated with how we transform education nationally and internationally. And I think what's happened in the last 24 months, I couldn't have predicted. I always thought we could make nice platforms. And now we're moving into the level with AI of being able to make great content and move the capacity for people that might not be great at design or storytelling and kind of create tools that can let really anyone put in what they're trying to teach and have frameworks and scaffolding that make that learning experience beautiful, engaging, and just elevate someone's skills incredibly. Um, yeah, so I think that that's good for just an intro.
Great, Jamie. So before we pivot, Jamie's going to share some of what we've developed. And does anyone have any questions for us or relatable experience that you think would be interesting to share while Jamie's getting his material up? All right.
Okay, I'll just jump in. Okay, so I'm not really here to do a product demo. It's really just to show how we've used Neutopia and the tools in Neutopia in the use case that Matt's explained this morning. So a lot of attention has gone into building Neutopia so the interface is feels very contemporary, very modern. And a lot of that isn't just for the aesthetics, it's that if we can lower cognitive load, through the UI, the user interface, feeling very familiar. A lot of people say, "Oh, it feels like Spotify, it feels like Netflix, feels like LinkedIn." That was very intentional because we don't want people spending their cognitive energy on trying to figure out how to use the platform. So it hopefully does feel familiar. So someone comes in, picks their interest, picks in this case, they're a parent, a teacher, an employer, the different personas. And then they come to a homepage that will start to recommend content the way Spotify does or the way Netflix does. That the content will be aligned to who you are as a teacher, as a parent, as someone with ADHD to give you resources that are going to be hopefully more relevant. We do have inbuilt course creation, as I mentioned. So courses can be presented within the platform and can be built very easily, very intuitive system. We have the ability to have events in here and then social groups on, and you can see here employment, a road safety course. So you kind of have your main community, everybody, and then all the subgroups. I'll just go into one. So just having things that you can put in links and, again, trying to make it as familiar as possible. And then we have different flexible tools to have, in this case, it's being used for providers. So providers have a space to introduce themselves, a little bit like a company page on LinkedIn. And then all the members. So everyone has a profile. So that's kind of basics. There's a community feed again. So if you think the main LinkedIn feed and then all of the smaller groups. So that's the basics. Now going into, I guess, the more interesting approaches for learning and development. What we're starting to do is create tools that harness AI in ways that can make experiences more neuro-inclusive. And so a lot of thought's gone into this, like what would help people. So if you consider that you have an original article, let's say this could be a 40-page research paper, that you have a lot of deep content. Now, for someone who's 20 with ADHD, they're not going to read that research paper. And a lot of people will find that very difficult to approach. So we look at, okay, can we simplify it? Can we get it down in, to an easier reading level? And I know myself, I use ChatGPT all the time to say, can you make that material that's not my world at a ninth grade level? So just simplifying it because it's a form of translation from domain expertise to someone who doesn't have that expertise. Then can we make it visual? And I know this gets into the world I love, which is storytelling and film. So can we make something approachable for people that are visual learners? Then some people would prefer to listen.
Executive function is like your brain's manager. It helps you pay attention, remember things, and switch between tasks.
Did that sound play, Matt?
Yes, it did.
Okay, cool. Sometimes you don't know. Okay, then not everyone speaks English. So can we let people listen in the language they prefer?
Es como el gerente de tu cerebro. Te ayuda a prestar atención, recordar cosas y cambiar entre tareas.
And the translation now is so good.
Lucy Filton feed hive method mdir DMD sac lent be Whitsker lishi rutedil bin limhum. Kari apke mestis ke praben kitar haya apko diandene si jonko ya drokni arkarion ke big svikarnemen mended karta hai.
Okay, so we can move into lots of languages and text to speech. And then the next transformation is, can we bring it to life?
Oh, okay.
Executive function is like your brain's manager. It helps you pay attention, remember things, and switch between tasks.
So literally moving through, you go, here's the text, let's simplify it, let's move it into the world of images. Let's let people listen text to speech. Let's let them listen in the language they prefer, and let's bring it to life if that's easier for people to digest information.
Executive function is like your brain's manager. It helps you pay attention, remember things, and switch between tasks.
Okay. So what does it look like in ADHD Assist in the platform? So here's a more real example of a long article, and this is probably actually a short one, a couple pages versus something that might be 40 pages. Then on the summary tab, it's now put it into chunking and just kind of the exec summary. Here's an infographic generated with additional ways of just chunking the information and even putting some quick tips down here, all coming from that original article. Then putting things into story, metaphors, analogies. So now you can read this about an actual, in this case, a student, a lesson that it's kind of almost becoming teaching material, learning material, and kind of the moral of the story. So understanding and addressing ADHD through diagnosis and treatment can improve an individual's ability to manage their symptoms and achieve their goals. And that's what this story is about an actual character. And then this is using the images to put things into a graphic novel style format. And again, just thinking, how can we put the material into the ways that people prefer to learn so that they have agency to go, here's the information, that one works best for me, or I want it up here read in my language, text to speech. So the full range of different ways and different modes of delivering information and communicating. Any questions on any of that? Okay, let's see here. Oh, thanks for the comment. Glad you like it. Okay, so I guess one thing I want to point out that with the how we're doing it for governance, so the person receiving, so let's say the hundreds of people that might read that article are not doing the transformation. Our process is the person who puts that article on the admin side into the platform at ADHD Assist, let's say the internal team. We have a team of editors and content creators. They put it in. The tools let them quickly turn it into all of those different types of learning, the images, the text to speech, all of that. And then there's editing tools in the back end. So if they want to, after the AI does the transformation, if they want to fine tune, I'll just bring this up again. If they want to fine tune, let's say, they don't like this, they can edit it. They can edit the image. They can go in here and edit the summaries and go, actually, that's not exactly right, that sentence. The nuance is a little bit off. So there's full capacity for really good governance of the material. So it's not like the AI does it and it goes straight out. The AI is we have the tools to transform it. And then the editors are going through and fine tuning the material, checking it's valid, checking it hasn't simplified something inappropriately. So there is a governance layer moderating everything. And then once it's published, they'll choose to publish all the tabs or two of the tabs. So it's all managed in the back end with a team of content people looking over the material. So nothing's just going straight out with AI. Um, I think that's it, Matt, as far as covering stuff, unless you have some questions or want me to cover anything.
I thought it might be interesting to show the dyslexic font just as
Oh yeah, yeah.
another access sort of
Okay.
opportunity for the community.
Yep.
Took the words out of my.
Okay, let's see here. I gotta find something that we can do it with. Okay, so what we also have a different tool that when materials are put in here, like a URL, you basically to add content into Neutopia, just put the URL from over 1,000 platforms. You can do that with YouTube, Vimeo, New York Times. So you drop in the URL. In this case, it's something published on the ADHD Australia site. So they drop the URL in from the website. And then we have a range of tools up here where people can change the font size, the spacing, and then over here they can put it into a serif, with the curly Q kind of font, if that's easier on their eye. Then we have open dyslexic font. So that's a special font created that makes it easier if you have dyslexia to read. So it converts everything into that. And there's a focus mode, which kind of darkens this area to get your eyes focusing down. So you can see it's subtle, but it is effective. And then we have a ruler in case that's easier to scroll seeing a ruler. And then we have text to speech in multiple different voices. And you can just play and it will read the entire article to you. So that's all just right in there. Um, yeah.
Great. Thank you, Jamie. So you'd probably gathered that this is moved from Project Alexandria to ADHD Assist, and what Jamie just shared with you was a sandbox, not the live version. But again, just sort of zooming back up, you can see the philosophy that we created in terms of our engagement and design principles come to life here. So, for example, earlier I talked about design for the edges. So, some of our community has ADHD and dyslexia. So, obviously, we want to be able to make sure that those individuals are catered for. A portion of our community speaks Thai. Those individuals need to be able to consume content in Thai and in a way that makes sense. Much of our community is very visual, so they need to be able to see and consume content in that sort of way. So what we've tried to do here is turn this engagement philosophy, which is really about how do we provide access to safe, like I said, authoritative information to a very large community, but do it in a way that is personalized down to every individual's need. So recognizing that each of our everyone in our community is an individual, so that individual needs to experience that value in a way that they can relate to, and that's we've worked really hard on trying to bring this to life. But as you'd be well aware, and Jamie sort of mentioned a little bit, there are other things besides the platform that we have, that there are a lot of considerations. One is how do we govern the content, right? So how do we make sure that the information that we're sharing is actually trusted where necessary, evidence-based, and so forth. So, we've built and are continuing to build a governance structure from the top down to manage that process with multiple checks on content and multiple tests for making sure that the community is getting what they want and feedback loops and things like that. How do you equip and build a team to curate the content? And how do you do that in a way that they understand what's important and what's not, what's relevant and what's not, and what the priorities are? So, for example, we're uh, we're skewed towards making sure that individuals in disadvantaged communities have access to what they need as a priority, perhaps as compared to the mainstream, and so on. So there's tens and tens and tens of considerations that we're working through, but everything sort of that we're doing anchors back to that core vision and design philosophy, which is safe, trusted, authoritative, meet me where I am, and do this in a way that can provide opportunities for our whole community to engage. And that's what ADHD Assist has really become. So that is the case study in a sense, what we're doing. And we're on this journey. Our goal is to um, achieve. We'll have 100,000 people on this platform this year. We'll double that each of the next couple of years towards our goal of being able to provide this safe space for our whole community. And in the meantime, we'll continue to provide opportunities for all those individuals and resources that support those with ADHD to also access their knowledge and resources as well, and provide an opportunity to connect authorities to our community in the meantime. So really the goal is to create a beautiful, compelling experience that our community can relate to. The technology is a bit of is the enabler to that, but the philosophy of really starting with experience and engagement and bringing that to life is at the core of the way we think about how we work with our community. So in a sense, that community engagement is everything here. Hopefully that makes sense to everybody. I know it's a quick tour in 45 minutes, but we'd love to hear your feedback and thoughts. I know a couple people have put a few comments in, but this is a great opportunity for us to learn from what you're doing. So we'd love to open it up if anyone has some thoughts or comments or thinks we're on the wrong track or doesn't understand what we're communicating, please share. This is a great opportunity for a few minutes of sort of interactive design. Anyone? Thomasine, I see a big smile on your face behind that, in front of that big mansion. What do you think?
No, it looks fantastic. I was, yeah, very impressed. I haven't seen anything quite like that before. So, yeah, well done.
All right. What about you, Ben? You're on my screen here. What are you thinking? Have we got it right? Have we missed something? Yep.
I think it's terrific. Yeah. So I work for the Australian Institute of Training Development, and I was just listening with absolute fascination on the way design thinking, as well as where you've got to in terms of providing that for ADHD neurodiverse learners. I thought it was fantastic. So obviously, in terms of a case study and what our members are interested in is what's the outcomes. I've I look forward to hearing a lot more about that. But I thought it was terrific. Thank
Yeah, I
you.
mean, a brief word on the outcomes really is what we want is a safe, enabled community, right? That has a place to go with, to get the knowledge and resources that are going to help them navigate this condition. But I think for us is to be able to achieve that at a scale that meets the needs of most of our community is the big challenge.
Yeah,
So
I think from a learning and development perspective, and I know Jamie, you're an evangelist in that space. That's great. Certainly, one of our community. So yeah, for all our members, we'd be interested and go, cool. You've got that. I understand your outcomes. You're all leading to this place where how has the community engaged? What improvements? Because no doubt you'll find a few gaps, as you go out. You talked about those extreme levels. I was really interested to see how you're just trying to find that balance in the normal curve, if you like. Um,
mm,
and yeah, so very keen to hear what the engagement is like in the community, how they found that library. I like the way you project named it as well, in terms of that and anchored it in something. So yeah, keen to hear.
thanks, Ben. How about you, Simon? Oh, we lost you there. Sound.
Hey
There you go.
Matt, there's a couple questions in the chat,
Okay.
one from
Well, we'll give Simon
Victoria.
a quick opportunity and then we'll move on to the chat if that's all right.
Yeah, thank you. No, echoing what others have said, it's amazing, I guess, to see the content that's been created and how flexible it is in responding to the needs of your constituents. And maybe to the point of the point of engaging those constituents, do you have sort of a sense of how you track or measure, I guess, how successful you are in building that sort of safe space that you've described, or how engaged your users are?
Sure. I'll let Jamie take the engagement question, and then I think the safety one is a challenge that I'll pick up in a second.
Oh yeah. Simon, I can ADHD Assist is pre-launch, so can't speak to stats there, analytics there. With some of our other clients, they have a couple thousand students, let's say, at a learning institution, and it's very high from a more in at this stage in the social community and all the interactions of having a very strong. Their goal is to have a very strong digital space across 7 campuses and feeling fragmented. So that's probably a good use case example where being able to have everyone have a single place to connect in a digital space 24/7. So using digital in that way. Some of the learning programs that I've run with different clients usually has over 90% completion. So those are some special cases of like bespoke learning experiences and designing them in particular ways for high engagement. And if I was asked like why is that, I think quality of the content and the thinking that went into how to approach learning to have it being engaging in just the delivery of it. And if you want to reach out, I'm happy to have a longer chat that does a deeper dive in learning design and all of that. So, work equally in that area as well.
And Simon, just from a point of view of safety, we have an ultra super engaged community. So if aside from what I mentioned before about our internal governance, which is pretty high level, um, we'll know. The community will give us feedback in real time, and we will be on top of making those adjustments. And this is from years and years of experience running live events and running global conferences and things like that, where, we immediately we get the feedback and we can adjust in real time. But it means we have to be on our toes all the time. There were a few questions. Victoria, you had an interesting question, I think, about physical movement and interaction. I wonder it'd be interesting to unpack that for a second. What are you getting to there?
One of the things we've learnt in working with children and young people is it's really important to link movement to narratives. Yes. So I'm just wondering if a young person is using your tool, your platform, how could they move or interact with that platform? Can they ask questions and get answers? And is there any way that your strategies, lessons can have a physical element to them? So the young people practices something they've learnt from your platform.
I'll let you take that one, Jamie.
Oh, okay, cool. So perhaps not we haven't developed stuff in ADHD Assist yet using that, but we have at Neutopia got tools for interactive chat. So we have some learning experiences where you're actually talking to, let's say, learning from a master in some domain. And so having tools that you can chat with them and understand their entire philosophy. An example would be, let's say, Frank Lloyd Wright from architecture is something we're working on with one of the clients. And I love what you're saying about movement and practice. My personal strong belief is that we don't embed enough practice in learning. That if you think about if you're learning to master basketball or cooking or piano, it's about practice hours, not assessment. So you kind of don't want to get me started on this because I'll really get going, but I won't. Talking like with a lot of the more innovative schools, the chats we're having is how do we shift it from assessment focus to practice focus? Because what AI unlocks now is the ability to have practice feedback loops, as many as you want. And you think the more times you get to practice throwing the basketball through the hoop, the better you get. There's no coach that's going to say, read the manual on how to hold the basketball. They're going to say, start shooting hoops, as many as you can get in an hour. So I really am trying to shift the thinking to let's have more practice loops of whatever the practice is. It depends on the domain you're learning. Is it a physical practice in cooking or sports or music, or is it, time doing architecture design? So it'll depend what the domain is, but I think what you're saying is very true that we can't embody knowledge unless we get it in our body. You can't just have it all up here. And I think assessment biases everything to memorization, and you usually forget it a week later because it's in short-term memory. Whereas if you get 1,000 practices in, you're fine getting assessed because you've embodied it. So yeah, that's my particularly strong view.
And one small
Jamie,
comment, Victoria, on the chat. Sorry, Rob, I was just gonna make a quick comment. On the chat, in the first release of this, we're not prioritized that because back to the point about safety, we want to make sure that we get the feedback on the core capability first before we sort of create a situation where individuals can have too much unmoderated contact. So I guess it's sort of a safety first philosophy. Over time, as we build up more experience, we'll open that up, but it's a risk, and we have to manage that carefully. Sorry, Rob. I didn't
The
think
only thing
you
I
were
just
gonna make the same
no, it's
comment.
fine. The only thing I just want to add to what Victoria was saying. In the meantime, we can in terms of movement, we can solve that with the nature of the content. So we have an education uh, piece on road safety traffic for neurodivergent kids, 6 to 8, learning how to do road safety, crossing the roads safely and the like. And there is a movement component in that. So we've developed a lot of augmented reality techniques where kids can move and nod and point and be able to be learn about these things interactively. So there's a systems way of doing it, which we'll get to, and that there's a content way as well. So if anybody wants to do something similar like that out there, think about doing it in your content as well.
We're almost out of time. I did want to pick up on the point about volunteers. How do you find the people, the volunteers, and the time, et cetera? I'm sorry, I can't see your name. One more time?
You.
Jill, sorry, Jill. I should have remembered that. The thing is, we've been really surprised about with volunteers. I mentioned before we have a hyper engaged community. I'll give you an example. We just put out a job advertisement for an editor-in-chief to support some of this work at our board level. We got maybe 40 or 50 really high quality candidates for that role. And part of our screening process is we have one role, there's 40 people, but then let's say that 30 of those people are potentially valuable contributors. What we do is we qualify them into other roles. And we've been really lucky. We created this concept a couple years ago called the Volunteer Army. And we've sort of decided that our biggest asset as a not-for-profit is this engagement. And it's sort of an awkward, not awkward, but it's a lens that we might otherwise not have looked at. Like, what's our key capability? This engagement is number one. So being able to turn that capability into capacity is like our superpower. But if you want to talk about that offline, send me a note. Happy to chat. Yep. Got a bit.
Hey, Matt, you got one last question from Nicole, and I
Yep.
think that's for more. Nicole, I can just say we have plans for an app later this year. It's responsive, so you can use it on mobile tablet, from a Neutopia point of view, and then I'll leave for you, Matt, the other part of the question.
Okay, it's a long question. All right, so great. Blah, 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 blah.
Users is open-ended, Nicole, because we can
Yeah.
hold a lot of users. That's not a problem.
Yeah, we don't really have a limit to the number of users. And I mentioned before, our goal is to make this available to the whole community. Decision making is a very interesting question, right? So there are tens of thousands of decisions that we all make every day. And in this ADHD world, some of those are clinical, some of them are educational, and so forth. To be honest, we haven't really done a mapping of those kinds of decisions. And it's much more about being able to give people what they need at different stages of their journeys and use that information to support their individual journeys. But I think that is an opportunity for us to work a little bit harder. Okay, and then there's a question from Emma. Emma, can you vocalize this question just so that I can avoid reading it and interpreting it? Is that all right? And then we should probably wrap up. All right, we may have lost Emma. Emma had a complex question here. So what we might do is we might pick that one up offline and circulate it around. We do have a contract on time with you, so thank you so much for joining us and for your questions. And what we'll do is, if you're interested, we'll send around the audio, and please feel free to share it around. We're always looking for good ideas and support. So, yeah, to the extent that you have meaningful input that we can use to make this better, we're wide open to that. And our philosophy as a not-for-profit is it's hard out there. We all need to work together to create mutual opportunities for shared success. So hopefully we can start that journey here today. Thank you so much.
Thanks, everyone. Nice to meet you.
All the best, Jill. Thanks. Thank you, Victoria. Thanks, Mark.